how did Yeti build that cool factor?
There's a few ways that Yeti went about it. I mean, one of them is just, a pretty radical product speaks volumes, right? And you give someone the opportunity to go and use that, especially, the way that we use and abuse stuff for our passions and pursuits, like people are stoked on the product itself. People use the word authenticity probably way too much these days, but like the people behind the brand actually hunt and fish and actually really care about hunting and fishing.
Yep.
And really plug into those communities, whether it's by putting dollars back into those communities through a variety of conservation projects or just by going out. Like when we go create content, we're not going to go fake a photo shoot or a video shoot. We're going to go do the thing.
Now you can write this whole thing off as a business trip.
Perfect.
Here we go.
We're going to start submitting all those receipts, get some good expenses going.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah. Wait a minute. You took your kids and did what? How is that a business?
Yeah. We're just, floating some rivers, hiking some trails, some alpine lakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
We've had some great business connections.
So you're going rafting this afternoon. Are you guys fly fishing?
No, just purely hop in a raft and float down the river. My boys are still a little young, I think, to
deal with fly line.
Figure out the fly line. I'm too young to figure out the fly line. I don't know.
Yeah.
I spend more time untying knots than I do actually catching fish. So
yeah. There was a time when my kids were your kids' age that I gave up on bringing my own pole. Like you're just a professional.
Just a knot tire and untire.
Untire, yeah.
Yeah, so our place in Texas, we love to fish and they love to fish, and it's about as easy. It's pond, it's bass. It's as easy as fishing gets. And about when you get one untangled and he's back in the otter, the other one's he's either hooked up or he's hooked up on a bush.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, let's get that one untangled. And you just go back and forth, and that's dadhood.
I love it when they're standing there talking to you and they got their pole straight up in the air and they're doing this and the pole's just moving around and the line is just doing figure eights around itself and through and around and then they're like, and then they hand you the pole like, here, my line's tangled.
It's messed up. Or the other is, that it's out there and they've just got those treble hooks are just bouncing around and you're like watching, dodging, testing your...
One of our employees put a treble hook through his ear. Henry, was it Travis? Travis, I think, stuck a treble hook right through his ear the other day fishing with Matt, I think. So we were making some good fun of him.
Oh, that's brutal.
We got the photo.
Oh, that's what matters. Did y'all have to do the, pinch the hook down and
I don't know what they did.
Or?
I'm not sure exactly what they did, but if I was Matt, I would have just ripped it out of his ear,
Oh, yeah, just
straight out.
Yeah.
But so working for Yeti, you get probably to go on, because what's your official job title?
Yeah, my official job title is community marketing manager. And then I have an emphasis in the hunt community. And so all of the relationships that Yeti holds in the waterfowl, whitetail, and big game space kind of flow through me. So, I could go off all day on a lot of nuances there, but like the big thing is I'm a professional friend to all of our relationships in the hunting industry. So
it's such a cool job because, we actually kind of hired would he be your predecessor kind of?
Yeah, the exact same role. So Sloan, I have filled his role after he left. Yeah,
so Sloan Brown that works for us that people don't know was in Andrew's position at Yeti, and talking to Sloan, it's kind of what he's filling for us right now. It's just it's a cool job because like your job is to meet cool people and have relationships, and like I always say that my favorite part of owning Montana Knife Company is the actual people part of it.
For sure. And so like we joke about, well, this is a business trip, but really it is, a lot of the connections or folks I'm coming to meet and bring my family to visit with are folks that I've met through my time at Yeti in the hunting industry in some form or fashion. They may not be directly like, a hunting guy, but we're going to go float the river with a buddy who guides whitewater rafting. And it's just cool.
It's interesting. I tell my employees when like we were at TAC last week and you were there, we were down in Big Sky, and I tell my employees, they're all in community marketing when we're together at an event like that. And quite frankly, 24/7, if they're out at a bar in town in Missoula, like people are starting to recognize them, or like, they get to talking and they're like, wait a minute, you work for MKC and you're immediately now a community marketer.
Yeah. You're the face of the brand.
Yeah.
And so that's one it's like sometimes a blessing, sometimes a curse, but usually a blessing is like when I'm going to, I go to a lot of events. That's one of the facets of my business. Or I go visit our lodge and outfitter program folks, other, brands like yourself, and I am Yeti to those people. So when they think, who is Yeti, they're going to bring, in my case, my face. Or in the fishing industry, there's a guy, Jake Dries, they're going to think of his face. And so a lot of times, a lot of what we do, we're relational people, we're communal people, and we make decisions based on those communities, and so I want people to have a positive impression of who Yeti is, right? Like, I want them to go, hey, you know what? There is someone there that does what I do, right? Like they spend every minute they can from mid-August to the end of January in the field hunting. Right. And there's a lot of authenticity that comes from that. And frankly, man, we get to go do some cool things because of it.
Yeah. And it's one of the perks. I mean, with what I've been doing and whatnot, and with going on some of these hunts, it's like, how do you carve out a job in life paying for your habits, for your fun habits, to go hunting for your pastimes, and we joke about it, but, and you will never hear me actually complain about it, but it is actually amazing sometimes, like how tiring all of that stuff can be, cause you go on a hunt and you hunt all weekend, or you hunt for 5 or 6 days. And then when you're back in the office on Monday, nobody cares about your hunt, or that you were actually kind of technically, frankly, on the clock all through the weekend and all through all that. Like, yes, you're hunting, but it is kind of an exhausting thing. And especially the relationship side. Like, I find myself, like, after a day at TAC, Sloan and I were this way actually after the Western Hunt Expo. He was staying in my room with me at the hotel there. And he's like, what do you think? What are you going to do? I was after the show. Yep. And I was like, I want to go lay on my bed and not talk.
That's exactly
right. And we both went back to our beds, and we just both are sitting on our beds looking at our phone.
Yep.
And just, we didn't say a word for like an hour.
Yep.
And it was like, all right.
Notifications off.
Yeah.
Put it down by the bed, and you're like,
I'm done speaking for the day. Because that you have to be on.
Always.
Always. And, me as the owner, I have to take ownership in my brand. But really, if you're a good employee doing what you're doing for Yeti, you have to act as if you own Yeti. You have to always be thinking about how you're coming across for your company.
100%. And a lot of what I do on the relationship side, we have our ambassadors. And so at these events, or if we're on a hunt, we're on a photo shoot, video shoot, whatever it may be, I'm really I'm their host and I'm their guy, right? Like when they're coming from Cole Kramer, our Sheridan ambassador, if he's coming from Alaska, he probably didn't have...
Nobody likes him either.
They can't stand him. So he's got to have somebody there to hang out with. Yeah. But, if we're bringing him into a scenario where he doesn't have any of his friends or connections there, no one wants to go somewhere by themselves, right in the middle of nowhere. So, I am our ambassador's guy. Whatever they need, I want to make sure that I'm there, available, ready to hang out for them. And, most of the time they're going to come do something. They're going to want to hang out after the event. So that means we're up.
The most difficult part has got to be hey, can I get a cooler? I got something I want to talk to you about. And it's interesting because we kind of joke, and there's representatives like this for most brands, whether it's Sitka or MKC or Yeti or whatever. Mm-hmm. You're also kind of the candy man, as far as you're the access to these people to hand stuff out. And it's super difficult. I know as the owner of the company, the one thing that you have going for you is you can always kind of blame it on your budget or your boss.
Exactly.
you know, when people come and talk to me about stuff, they're like, I'm like, I guess, do I ask my wife?
That's right.
It's hard though, because you have to you have to weigh out all the different things, and you want to give stuff to everybody. Sure. You would love to just give everything away, but that's not the nature of the business. And you have to think a lot about, how that person might represent your brand, and what kind of a following do they have. Sometimes it's their potential down the road. Like you can see a star that's up and coming.
Yep.
And I'd like to hear what you think about it, but for me, it's how do you kind of let somebody down or support them in the best that you can, but also your boss isn't going to let you give a Yeti 110 to everybody.
Exactly. Some of that's changed over the years. There was a time where, Sloan's predecessor, Ben O'Brien, he kind of wrote the rules for what is this job? And at the time, Yeti was completely private. And so, it was a little bit yes. Okay. Oh, sure. You want something? Okay.
And frankly, that's how we build MKC. Like when you don't have a ton of marketing budget, giving product away is the best.
100%. You get people stoked on your brand. They're out using your product. That product's going to show up in all of, the variety of ways, whether it's social media or just in conversation, right? Like it's a proof point. Like, hey, have you seen those knives Josh is making? Oh man, you know what? I've got one. They're awesome. Like held an edge for all this time. Man, I beat the heck out of it. I was over here chopping away at a stump or something on it. And here it is still holding together. Like that word of mouth is single-handedly the most influential tool that we have as marketers. But, there's a few different ways that we'll sift through it. Sometimes like I just want to be upfront with a lot of people. Like I want to be honest, like, hey, I don't know that that's just the best fit for us right now. I do like I've got a budget and I've got to actually stick to that budget. I've got some slush or ways that I can move to that around. But for the most part, like if I got a plan for it, I turn in my budget October of every year. And for the most part, I don't get to deviate. I'm not the guy that moves the needle on what the budget is. And so I've got to work within those parameters. So there's times where like, really, I really have enjoyed our relationship or what you do, or that you're stoked on Yeti, but it doesn't quite fit the budget.
Right.
But there's other times where I'm like, I don't want to say like challenge people, just be like, hey, do you think you'd move the needle for us? Like, do you think, you having that cooler is going to help? And, like a lot of times, I think people appreciate me just asking that question. And then, man, if they can come give me a good case, it's like,
sure.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to get that cooler in front of these people, or even just, hey, yeah, I'll give you some feedback on using this cooler in that way. Or, especially as we expand our different product portfolios, the waterproof stuff or the go boxes for storage. Like, frankly, a lot of times I want to know, how are you using this thing?
Sure.
Like you're a gear guy, man. I walk through your gear area and you are organized and just have this stuff laid out in a great way. Man, I want you to go use these products so I can learn, hey, how is Josh putting this thing to use? And then when I'm thinking through all the different ways I'm going to go market that in paid media or e-commerce and stuff, I'm like, hey, you know what? Josh had this cool idea on how this thing works.
Yeah. Andrew Oliver that works for us, he worked for Amazon first. And at Amazon, part of the reason they became so successful and so huge is it's customer first. It's always about the customer. And you're always learning from your customer and seeing like, it could just be a guy that bought a Yeti that did something really cool, maybe attached something to it or carried it in his truck in a certain way or just said, hey guys, you guys should really think about doing a go box where I can have like a toolbox where I can have a tray in it. And it's like, damn, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing how people, same with the knives, people can say stuff and it's like, the guy's actually got a really good point. Like we should maybe think about how we could do that,
In particular, I'm always thinking like, it's the nature of the beast. I'm, as you know, I'm not really plugged in on social media, except I'm plugged in as far as I have to be. I've got a profile and I got to get on there and I got to, keep pulse on what's going on in the world, but I don't really post myself and kind of stay out of that. But, like people care about content. They want to see things that are cool and they want to discover like, oh, that's a great usage of blank product. Yeah. And so then I can go to our team and be like, hey, social, let's go pack a go box the way that, Josh is packing it for a bear hunt here in Montana or something like that.
It's one thing that Yeti did, and I know this was kind of before you came along, but I'm sure you've heard the stories and whatnot about it. It's something that we've tried to somewhat emulate and copy, frankly, almost reenact, I guess, or bring back, or I don't know how you would say it, but Yeti is such a cool, like it became such a cool brand. And let's face it, it's a cooler, right? Like
for sure.
No one ever thought a cooler was cool before, no pun intended.
Yeah, there you go.
No, it's the coolest cooler out there, And how did Yeti become so cool? And it's something that like we've said from day one, I have said, like, I want Montana Knife Company to be the Yeti of the knife world, where it's kind of the cool thing to have. It's super high quality because, like, I don't care how cool something is. Like, it's part of why Yeti got so cool was because it is so much better. But then it became like the thing to have, you know. And the other thing that Yeti's done really well, and we find ourselves in this position of trying to be Switzerland because there's, the guy that wears Kuiu, or there's the guy that wears First Light or Eberly Stock or Sika gear. And you can very easily as a brand get sucked into just being like in one brand, because there's really cool people at these brands, and like you want to support them, and you want to be, you want to be loyal to them because they've been really nice to you. But then there's also a really nice guy over at this company, and you want to support them. And I've always said, it doesn't matter what camo you have, like those guys all have a Yeti.
Yep.
And that's where, like with the knife world, I want that, where our knife is with everybody. It doesn't matter what you wear. But how did Yeti build that cool factor?
Man, I think there's a few ways that Yeti went about it. I mean, one of them is just, a pretty radical product speaks volumes, right? And you give someone the opportunity to go and use that, especially, man, the way that we use and abuse stuff for our passions and pursuits, like people are stoked on the product itself. And then you go off, and I'd call it like brand building, but people use the word authenticity probably way too much these days, but like the people behind the brand actually hunt and fish and actually really care about hunting and fishing, and really plug into those communities, whether it's by putting dollars back into those communities through a variety of conservation projects, or just by going out. Like when we go create content, we're not going to go fake a photo shoot or a video shoot. We're going to go do the thing. Yeah. Like if we're going to talk about, an elk hunt, we're going to go to archery elk hunt in September with someone that's really good at archery elk hunting, and we're going to get what we're going to get from a content perspective. Yeah. And so I think people, like especially hunters, man, you can sniff out BS from a mile away, right? Yeah. And I'm not necessarily calling anyone specific in the hunting industry, but there's times like, you're on some product building schedule, and it's like, oh, we need a photograph of someone with this, call it a rain jacket. And, you're in the middle of June, and you're like, hey, we need to make it look like it's October, right, and wet, and they're going to go stage some photo shoot, and people can sniff that out really fast. Yes, and
I think the consumer is smarter than they've ever been.
100%. And so, like if we're going to go create some kind of content, we're going to go do it in the most authentic way we can. And then on the flip side, we really haven't cared about marketing our products. Like we just want to connect with people at the base of their passions, right? So we just want to go tell cool stories. Like humans are storytellers. We're people who love to relate to one another and work best in community. And man, we just want to go hear a cool story.
Yeah, and I think part of the answer to that question too about how it became so cool is frankly, the fact that you actually have a job right now. Yeah. Your position is a position that Yeti created, and they put a guy, the first guy, and then Sloan, and now you. When they put you guys out and you go stand and do the thing, like Total Archery Challenge is an example, because that's where we're at right now as far as in that time frame of the calendar, or at a fishing show or whatever, Yeti was actually putting representatives on the ground talking to the people doing the thing. Yep. And that makes people feel like, oh, this company cares about us. Like they actually came to our event. They're participating in it. Like Andrew's shooting a bow, and we're going up in the morning and we're doing the thing. And you don't see other brands of your competitors there. Like there's not, and I even saw that in the hunting knife world, in the knife community. There wasn't like a bunch of knife brands at hunting shows, or at hunting like Attack. Like that first one I came to in 2020, and I looked around. I'm not sure that there was even one knife company at that first one, and I'm like, every one of these people carry a knife, if 100%. Not multiple knives.
Exactly.
It boggled my mind, and same thing like you kind of led off with. I'm also a hunter, right? So we hunt, we do their thing, and that's where Yeti is so smart. And again, something that we want to emulate is like I'm not a deep sea fisherman. So when we start traveling into that part of the knife world segment, we need to go seek out a deep sea fisherman that can go talk to that community. And Yeti is so smart with that, with rodeo or fishing or hunting. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Or, like one of the places that we've recently stepped out into, like we've always, we've dabbled or had communities or had folks in the community of like, say, surf and skate. But just this last year, we stepped out and we are now like the title sponsor for the World Surf League. And that we spent a lot of time building relationships with folks in the surf community before we actually took the leap to go and say, hey, like we want to be a title sponsor of this thing. Sure. And I think there's a lot of effort in the groundwork of finding the right people, of building those relationships, and then going, you know what? Yeah, this is a space that we can, I'm going to say the word again, authentically speak to. But it's because like the people we have at Yeti who folks on that community are that community. And we're good friends with people who really shape or move that community.
Yeah.
And, you know, like I'll touch once more on just the storytelling. Like, I mean, even before my time at Yeti, like I looked forward to when Yeti Presents would come out. Like to me, those 100%. Are some of the pinnacle of, you know, you can call it advertising. I mean, all it is really great filmmaking and storytelling. And then they found a way to like really tap into these cool core stories to, you know, for me, the hunting world. But even when I'm getting a peek in the lens of like, you know, someone like Mark Healy for surfing or Mark Carter for snowboarding.
Yep.
And those guys are rad and they do awesome stuff.
Those films, and that was actually kind of my next thing I was going to touch on, was Yeti did such a great job of those films are not about a cooler.
Not at all. I mean, you could watch it and
I'm not even sure
may not
there's
see a product.
Cooler in some of those films.
Yeah, you might see a Yeti hat on somebody at some point.
Maybe.
If they thought about it, but they probably didn't. And they probably just went out and did something cool.
That's where Yeti, to me, got so much respect from me and friends of mine, and it sounds like you as well before you even worked there, is you watch those films and it was about the people.
Yep.
And I've, you know, Henry's sitting here. We've had this discussion. I've told him with our video stuff, we have some ideas of some films that he's already shot and he's editing now. I want to shoot similar style stuff where it's about the people, and it shows that it's those kind of people use our kind of product.
Yep.
But it's not about the product at all. It could be that film that I show could be for a company that makes jeans or boots or a cooler or a knife. It doesn't really matter. A fly rod, like it's a certain kind of people with that certain kind of film. And it doesn't matter if it's a surf or like that. I think it was Arctic Red. It was about a guide in Alaska.
Yep.
Just beautifully shot. Amazing footage those guys did.
100%. That like that's one of you look back on films. That one, and then my background really is like waterfowl and whitetail. But man, they made a film called Sam, and it's about dogs, waterfowl dogs especially. And man, that like tapped in my heartstrings in a few ways. You know, I'm a dad, and talks about there's a cool line in there, and it's like, again, I'm waterfowl background here, and it's like we measure our lives by the dogs we had at the time. I'm paraphrasing it there, but you know, like I was way into the dog world for a time. Came from a dog company, really like love my retriever. Grew up with all kinds of bird dogs or hunting dogs, and I can think back to all these memories. And I'm like, you know what? I know which dog were we hunting with on that day, and it like puts a frame of reference on these really cool memories that I have with my dad or my granddads or really close family friends. You know, we always had a dog around doing these different pursuits.
Yeah,
and that was a cool line. And man, like that film especially, I was like, man, these guys get it.
Yeah. So that. You know, touching on, I wanted to get to your background. So you're kind of the face of Yeti for the hunting community. And I got to say, they sure could have found some prettier faces.
That's right. I would say I got a face for radio, but here we are. There's probably a video for this podcast.
Exactly.
So
we might have to shut the cameras off.
Get a little blur going or something, you know.
Man, with all the people Yeti could have chose from.
Stuck with me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Brutal.
No, but anyway, all joking aside, I do want to know, like, I'm sure people listening out there as they're working their day job are like, how the hell do I get to go to Montana hunting or New Mexico or somewhere for a business, for a company? So, you know, what did you grow up hunting and fishing, and where did you grow up?
Yeah. So man, my family history is a pretty cool and unique one. So my family has been in the U.S. since pre-Revolutionary War. And so we've got this really cool, little booklets of our family tree tracing way back. And some of my sisters are like Daughters of the Revolution and that kind of like thing.
Really?
And so what's really cool though is just generationally, my family have always been hunters. So I learned to hunt from my dad, who learned to hunt from his dad. I knew and got to hunt with my great grandfathers. And like we've got pictures in the mid 1800s of like these big wall tent camps where they would go for 3 weeks at a time and they would travel out. You know, in this case, they were traveling to Mississippi, and they were going for a hunting camp for 3 full weeks. And, you know, they do everything from using dogs to drive deer at the time to hunt from horseback to, you know, shooting bears back when they were there at the time.
Yeah.
We've just been generational hunters from, you know, as far back, obviously, as I can remember. But as far back as we have a family tree, either they were hunting for sustenance or they were hunting as sport.
Right.
And, some of my extended family started one of the oldest hunting clubs, for sure in Mississippi. I need to go back and like date it one of these days and go, well, how old is this hunting club? But Marigold Hunting Club in Mississippi was one of the original like hunting club charters in the state. And, that was, I don't know how many greats. One of the great grandfathers helped start that. And it's cool to go back. I grew up hunting at that place in Mississippi. It's a really cool little peninsula at the confluence of like the White River, the Arkansas River, and the Mississippi River. Just a paradise for sportsmen. And, it was like 16,000 acres of just far and above excellent whitetail hunting. Yeah. Waterfowl hunting, turkey hunting, hogs. Pretty much it's interesting, like now being in the position I'm in, I'm always like, what's the right season and let's go and do the thing. And it's like a little bit of a frame shift from when I was growing up. It was just like, hey, we're going to go to hunting camp and like whatever season or conditions provide themselves, that's what we'll hunt. Yeah. And it's like, we'll show up, oh, you know what? The water's up. Like duck hunting is going to be good. Let's go duck hunting. Yeah. And it's like, oh, you know what? Hey, the rut's on. Let's go hunt deer. And we weren't like necessarily planning out what we were going to go hunt or what we're going to go chase. We're just like, we're going to hunt camp and
going to hunt something.
Whatever's going to be great, we're going to go hunting. Yeah. And so that's how I got into it was, the whitetail side and waterfowl. My folks, we still hunt in Texas as well. We've got a nice place that we get to hunt and shoot a decent amount of whitetail. It's all, low fence and nothing too huge, but I get to go out and take my kids with me and shoot some deer. And, they were with me this last season. I shot a pretty decent buck with my bow and they're right there with me in the blind, like getting me all hyped up. And
that's cool. Cause they're what, 4 and 6?
4 and 6.
And then you got a little, 18-month-old?
That's right. Year and a half. And we got one more on the way.
I didn't want to spoil that in case.
I know. Yeah.
You're down the road a little ways on that.
We're safe. We're in the clear. I got the thumbs up to to let the world know.
4 kids.
4 of them. Yeah. It's going to be wild.
I remember when I found out my ex was pregnant with our 4th, and all I remember thinking, because that was a surprise, it was not planned, and I remember thinking that 4 kids fit in nothing. No vehicle that we own fits 4 children. Like, forget the console in the center of the front of your truck. Who makes a bench seat in a pickup? We are now going to have a little set of legs sitting there between us for about 10 more years. Yep.
That's exactly what my wife and I just had this conversation. We're on this trip. We have this rental truck, and it's got that bench seat in the middle, and we're like, I'm going to have to buy a new truck now because we've got baby number 4 on the way.
Yeah, you're breeding yourself right out of a vehicle.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and then it got to the point because like taking them on family trips and stuff, by the time my oldest Demi kind of left home, she's now 18 and she graduated last year. But it was kind of a relief when she left home because now like when we go somewhere, the poor kid in the middle, Macy's getting pretty big. And they don't make that middle seat for comfort.
Oh, no.
And when they're your kids' size, it's no big deal. It's whatever. But, man, she'd be sitting there uncomfortable. We got a pad for her to sit on, and her little knees are up. And, she's now, 5.5 feet tall, and she's sitting in that middle seat. And it was designed definitely for a 5-year-old.
Oh, yeah. Like that. We got to get a seatbelt on them, that kind of seat. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess a little bit more, though, on my hunting background. That's how I grew up. And I, I consider myself really blessed. Like my grandfathers are still in good health to hunt, and they're in their mid-80s.
So that amazed me when we were hunting last year. You sent me a picture. I think we sent your grandpa a knife.
Yes, you did. Yeah, and he is over the moon about it.
But you had told me, was it your great-grandfather also? You took your great-grandfather hunting?
I took my grandfather.
Or your grandfather.
Because I had my sons with me. My grandfather's their great-grandfather. And so we had 4 generations all hunting together.
Which is so weekend. Cool. That's so rare.
And so like my 4-year-old shot his first turkey this year, the same weekend that my grandfather shot another turkey. And that's amazing. That was really special for me. I love to hunt and I love to fill tags myself, but I get so much joy out of their excitement for, jumping in on this passion that my family's had for generations. And then watching my granddad's become young men and boys again when my kids are out there just having fun. Yeah. My grandfather shot a nice buck last year, and my boys were out there with him, and they helped him, come find it. And their excitement at finding the deer just like amplified his excitement because he's shot deer.
How old is he?
He is 80. Oh, don't catch me lying here. Between 84 and 86.
That's amazing.
Sorry.
It's got to be so cool. Yeah. It's got to be so cool for him to do that with his great grandsons.
I think
that's
so.
Pretty cool.
It, like they half jokingly, half seriously are like, keeps us young.
Yeah.
And it's special. It's a lot of fun to go out there and spend that time generationally with them.
Yeah.
But then I guess in between the family stuff, I went to college. And I picked where I went to college in Arkansas because I was 25 minutes away from world-class duck hunting, 25 minutes away from a blue ribbon trout stream, some awesome.
And you passed class?
Yeah, somehow, some way.
Well,
right.
You clearly weren't focused on hunting enough.
Right, exactly. And so, I dove way off the deep end for duck hunting. I spent it's a 60-day season in Arkansas, and I'd spend anywhere from 45 to 50 days duck hunting. Built my whole class schedule around being able to be on the water every morning I could be, whether it was ducks or if it wasn't duck season, I was out fishing. And then somewhere in there, I threw in there's some pretty good backpacking in Northwest Arkansas, and so I'd, go do that if there wasn't a great time to catch fish or to be duck hunting.
Yeah. I duck hunted my way right out of college.
There you go.
Yeah. I was more dedicated.
That's right. You were better at sport.
They're just dumber.
They fooled me with I got some kind of scholarship and I found out that if I didn't maintain a certain GPA, they were going to take that scholarship away. Because, man, my first semester was
it
passed,
academic or
barely.
sports?
It was academic. I was remarkably mediocre at all things sports. Yeah, never, batted like 7th or 8th in baseball, barely. Yeah. I was on the team, but, about anybody could have been on the team.
Yeah.
So, I certainly no great in sports, but I got a little bit of an academic scholarship. So
that's cool.
My parents were very clear, like, hey, if that scholarship falls,
you're dead.
You're on your own.
Yeah. What did you major in?
So I went in thinking, because I love to hunt, I was like, man, I'd love to go into biology, find some form of something in the world of wildlife or forestry. Found out that I was not, in fact, cut out for a biology degree following that. So I immediately changed to a marketing degree. So I got a business marketing degree, which, if you got to pick a major to maintain a scholarship while hunting and fishing, that's a pretty good one.
That's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, I just wish they had a scholarship for duck hunting.
Yeah, that's right, man.
I mean, a professional.
That would be
hunter.
Awesome. You know, hey, they got these fishing teams, right? They got Texas A&M's got a college fishing team.
Yeah,
we could get some kind of
Texas A&M has a college fishing team.
Yeah,
Are you
right?
serious?
Yeah, Texas A&M. Man, Auburn's got a stellar fishing team.
Seriously?
Oh yeah, it's a thing. They're bass fishing crazy.
Really?
Yeah, those guys are.
I did not know that.
Yeah, they're world-class anglers too. Those dudes are great.
That's amazing.
Imagine getting a college scholarship to go catch fish.
Yeah,
build your class schedule around that. Hey, we need you to go fish this lake a couple states over.
Yeah, that's when life just cannot be better.
Yeah, 100. Oh man,
yeah.
There's a lot of commitments you have in college. I didn't sleep very much, but you know what? I had a whole lot of fun between all the different hunting, fishing things, and a lot less responsibilities than I have now with family. And I do actually have to work sometimes in this position.
Yeah.
Man, that would have been stellar.
Imagine I got to go train today.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Well, I'm gonna work on my casting. It's I haven't been quite landing it. I've been a couple inches off with a couple of my casts. So
yeah,
I'm gonna go fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You got to go practice a lake before you get out there for a competition,
So what was your first job out of college then?
Man, actually not at all related to hunting or fishing. So I worked for a financial services company. And I essentially,
my guess is they didn't send you hunting in Montana.
They didn't do that. It was one of my good friends in college. His older brother had a book of business for financial services, and he wanted to go off and create his own brand. He's like, hey, let me go get some marketing kid that wants to hustle and help build a brand. And so I got pulled into that. I worked there in Little Rock for close to 3 years, just building a brand from the ground up. Didn't exist as a brand. He certainly had a book of business, and so some revolving income there. Mm-hmm. But kind of created a financial practice that just catered to high-end physicians and dentists, and essentially a concierge financial practice. And so I got to learn, how do you be scrappy when you have, we were talking yesterday about I have a budget at Yeti because someone went off and said, hey, here's your dollars. But when you're a young company, it's just I don't know, we could pay for that. I'd rather not.
That's what
maybe
one of Sloan's first questions when we brought him on, he was like, all right, what's the budget here? And I was like, well, what are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, like we're just, you know, we're keeping the business flowing. Like
some real gut feel stuff going on here.
Exactly. And, you know, maybe. So like I got some good experience. Like how scrappy can we, you know, go create a brand, go build a website, go, and like, how am I going to go market to physicians and dentists? You know, you want to talk about like a hard to reach audience.
Yeah.
But you know, I got to go figure out how to be scrappy, how to do cool things. And I learned a lot of, you know, customer service in the process. Those guys expect a high level of, you know, pandering.
Yeah.
When they come into the office, they want to be treated like they're
like,
you know,
pretty special.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, I got to do that, got to be pretty good at that. And then, I left there, went and did kind of advertising agency world for a while. So worked for a boutique agency in Dallas, got to work kind of all of the, call it like their project-based clients. So like as an agency, you can either have retainers or projects. I had all projects. And so in my time there, I had a substantial number of clients all the way from like Southwest Airlines Business, like Bridgestone, America's, a cacophony of brands into that arm. All the way down to like startups and some mid-sized companies. So I got a peek behind the curtain at like a lot of different marketing companies. How do they structure a team? How do they go to market? How do you build a brand strategy? How do you, you know, execute on a media plan? All of those things. Mm-hmm. Got to really get in the weeds and figured out, you know, if I'm going to spend 80 hours a week working on something, I'd rather it be on something I liked.
Yeah.
So I left that, followed my wife to Nashville. She got a job at Vanderbilt doing a work study program to get an advanced degree while also working full time. She's a saint.
She's a worker.
She's incredible.
Yeah.
I followed her there, started working after a time for a company called Gunner Kennels, also made in the USA. Really cool company. Started by a guy named Addison Edmonds.
Making dog kennels?
Dog kennels. Like if a Yeti cooler was a dog kennel, double wall, rotomolded product, like that's what they make.
Yeah.
Super overbuilt, extremely durable, you know, premium priced. But you know, just you can't really build it any better.
Yeah.
And they've done a really good job. Like, there's a lot of similarities. Like I was walking around your place, I was like, man, there's a lot of similar feel to what it was at Gunner. You know, they were direct to consumer, 100% made in America, really diligent about making every product they could here in the States. And so, you know, I was a little earlier in the company, so my job title there was also a community marketing something or other.
Yeah.
But when you're a young company, it's
multiple hats.
You do a lot. You know, ran the social media for a while, along with, you know, helping out on creative stuff. You know, seeding product, responding to comments on social, and also just the general like marketing manager stuff. You know, getting print insertions done on time and things like that. So did that for a time, and then wrapped that. Stepped into this role at Yeti.
Very cool.
And here we are. So, you know, I had to hustle there for a few years. It was definitely not in the hunting world at all. But I sort of figured, man, if I'm going to really dive hard and spend a lot of my effort in work, I'd like to do something I enjoy doing.
Well, your story is kind of what, you know, like my 18-year-old daughter's still struggling to try to figure out what she wants to do in life. And I think there's too much pressure to try to think you're going to have it figured out on day one.
No, gosh.
You know, and that's where, you know, I think she feels a ton of pressure by that and stressed out and almost to a paralyzing state where, like, I don't know what to do. So, like, now I do nothing because I'm not totally sure.
Yeah.
And, you know, she's, you know, working down here and then talking about going back to school in the fall here. And that is the beautiful thing about a business degree or a marketing degree. They're so general that they do apply to everything. You know, it's a little tough. You know, if you get a teaching degree, you know, an elementary ed degree, or you get a biology, obviously there's definitely a lot of roads you can go in that direction for sure. But the business and marketing, business management, marketing, all that, you can literally do anything. I mean, you can just do everything. And it's just a piece of paper that allows you to say, I have this piece of paper. And it's like, oh, it's a knife company? Sure. Oh, it's talking to dentists? Sure.
Yeah.
It's like anything.
Yep.
Which is really cool. But your path shows that, you know, like you don't necessarily get everything you want day one coming out of school. Like, you got to take a job here and a job there. And even if you're helping build a company that's not super exciting or exactly what you want to do forever, there's also a lot to learn there. Like starting a brand. I mean, you were in a couple startups really, or a couple early stages. That kind of stuff is is huge. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we're working on right now and always looking for people that have that experience.
Yeah. And then when I come somewhere like Yeti that, I've got a little bit more of a budget to play with, well, I still have this scrappy mindset of like, man, how can I go create a lot, bang for my buck, right? Like, how can I really reach a lot of consumers with whatever this content is in an effective manner? And man, there's a lot of fluff in big business and big marketing because folks like myself just don't have time to, go put effort to do it scrappily.
Right.
But I still want to. And so coming from that scrappy background, I mean, I can take what my, X dollar budget is here at Yeti and go and apply that in a pretty effective way. So I can still help grow my community, even though my budget hasn't really grown.
It's interesting because we're in totally different spots. We're in that early stage where Yeti was early on, where people are starting to recognize who we are. It feels like a lot of people know who we are, but in reality, most people don't, which is actually an exciting spot to be in.
Oh yeah.
Because it feels like there's a lot of ground to gain.
Yep.
And I wouldn't say easily, but like if you do the right things, like there's a ton of ground for us to gain.
Definitely.
And we can gain it in big swaths. If the right video gets seen, or the right person posts, or the right, hunting guy talks about you, or the right brand, right? Like if Yeti did some big thing with us, all of a sudden we're exposed to all these massive people, or Sika or whoever, right? Big brands.
Yep.
It's interesting to me because we're in that phase, and then you start to get, you blow all the way through that, and now you get to the point where Yeti is, where to me, it becomes equally difficult to actually find new people that haven't been exposed to you. So like I was talking to another guy that works in a big brand in the hunting industry, and he said it's so hard to move the needle.
Yep.
Like we can peg the needle. Like we can make the needle spin around in circles.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
But you guys, the size you are, it's like if I ran into somebody that was like Yeti cooler, I've never heard of that. I'd be like, were you just unfrozen?
Yeah.
Right. So your job really, there's always new kids graduating high school. There's always new 20-year-olds coming along that maybe weren't, their parents couldn't afford a Yeti or didn't hunt or whatever. And so maybe there's people that don't have even the need for a cooler, live in big cities, and why would they have a big cooler, right? So I'm sure there's always some new people, but to me, the really cool part about what your job is to maintain the excitement.
Yeah.
And that's, Kip Folks, that's on our board of directors, he started Under Armour.
Yep.
Co-founded it. And he said there's a mass adoption phase, which is kind of what we're in right now, where people are excited and lots of people are coming to the brand. And then there's like this tear down phase where all of a sudden, people think you're too cool.
Yeah.
And they start to kind of chip away at you, and there's some bad stories that come out, or people say stuff or whatever. And if you can kind of weather that, then there's just that like, keep it cool. Like, okay, we survived some of that little tear down, crabs in a bucket stuff, or like the competitors start talking shit about you because now you're a big deal.
Yep.
Like nobody's real scared of Montana Knife Company yet, right? So like, there's not a big reason to just be tearing us apart.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden you get that where people are scrapping, and then, okay, now we're established. Now we're there. But then how do you stay cool and stay relevant? And Yeti is doing that, I think, as good as brand as anybody.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I'll lose some sleep at night sometimes. Just want to make sure we don't alienate ourselves.
Yeah, because how do you come to TAC year after year after year and keep it relevant, keep it cool, keep that message exciting, where you don't let some competitor sneak in that's like, it's like the new young hot girl, right?
Yeah, exactly. It is challenging. And maybe one more facet to it, like Yeti is still growing and growing rapidly. It's less growing in the hunting space and more like, I want to make sure that as we're growing in, say, like the surf space, who a person is in our surf community most of the time is largely different than our hunt community.
Yeah.
And so what I don't want to do is by us going and, hey, you know what? We relate to people who want to go spend all day on the beach. I don't want to alienate our folks that are like, hey, I want to go spend 10 days in the backcountry. And when I come back, I want my eyes to be cold for my bull.
Yeah, you don't want to turn and pivot away and forget about the...
Exactly. And so like when we go off and sponsor the World Surf League and we go create some really cool surfing videos, what I don't want to happen is our hunters go, well, there they go. Like they're no longer a hunt brand. They've given up on us.
Yeah, right.
So like I want to make sure that, I'm essentially like doubling down on some of our partnerships with key relationships in the hunting industry, like Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, or in the waterfowl world with like Ducks Unlimited. Like we are still really plugged in and trying to find really good ways for us to continue to support those communities. And also like man, showing up at these events with people that care about what they're doing. Like, man, when I show up at TAC, like I'm gonna go shoot the course. I'm probably gonna go shoot the course every day.
Right.
Sometimes like I'm open in the morning and I'll jump in with one of the staff and try to close the course because, man, I really love to shoot my bow. Like, I think it's a blast.
Yep.
But I'm also, I want to make sure that when consumers come into the booth, like, man, I'm gonna be like, hey, you draw any tags this year? Like, what do you have on the docket? What's travel for you?
Yeah.
From here in the state, like, what do you like to hunt? What do you like to do? What got you into archery? I think like continuing to show up, there are some other brands that maybe they have sponsored events, but they didn't necessarily show up. And there was a palpable absence of their presence there. And I want to make sure that like people don't experience that with Yeti.
Yes.
But also when I'm thinking growth, we have a lot of new people coming to the brand from other communities. Like we're slowly dipping our toes into like health and fitness world.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not going to necessarily go, hey, here's how to work out from Yeti.
Right.
We're going to want to do it through other communities. So we go, hey, how do some really cool backcountry hunters prepare for spending 10 days in the backcountry to keep themselves in shape? Or, for say the mountain community, like how does like Mark Carter stay in such great shape to be able to take on these radical mountains all over the world?
Yeah.
Or how does Mark Healy keep attacking those big waves for all of his life? Like that's our way into, say, health and fitness. Or when folks come to us like internationally, taking on this World Surf League has really brought us a lot of international folks. Their perception of hunting is probably very different from my perception of hunting.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure that like when they come and see us, I want them to see that, yes, we're a hunting brand, but I also want to make sure it's put forward in the best light possible.
Yeah.
And in a way that doesn't immediately turn them away from hunting, but rather gets them excited and go, wow, you know what?
Educates them a bit.
These guys are awesome in the surf world, and like they're okay with hunting too. Let me take a look at that. You know? And sometimes I think, we'll get some flack for that it's inevitable. And you always have people who like to chirp, but, I think that there's a lot of good when we have like folks from Australia who are just pumped on the brand. And their main thing is, say, I keep saying surfing, but that's just what's fresh in mind right now.
Yeah.
But then they come and see some really cool hunting content and they're like, man, you want to talk about a hunter's paradise is Australia.
Yeah.
Like you buy a one permit and you can pretty much, depending on what province you're in, but you can hunt year round.
Well, and even the way Yeti even pays attention to worlds that to a lot of people seem way off the beaten path and way like way inside baseball in a certain little tiny segment of the population, but like rodeo.
Yeah, man.
Right? Like a lot of people in the world might be like rodeo, like a few horses and some cowboys, like what a hick little thing or whatever. Those of us that know rodeo and that go to rodeo or that are in the West, in the South, you go to rodeo, you go to the national finals rodeo, and you realize it's a giant business. There's a enormous amount of people that are into it. It's a cool sport. Probably the most savage athletes as far as just like
animals.
Oh my God. To put up with what they put up with and get back on night after night, day after day. It's crazy. But for Yeti to be smart enough when they did to jump into a really kind of niche area, niche or niche? I don't understand. It's niche.
Niche.
Are you sure?
No.
Exactly. That's what I thought. Look it up, Henry. But to jump into that and pay attention to that, and I love that because they've done that in so many places. And when you're in like the knife world, for example, like I used to tell people like, "Oh, I'm a knife maker," and be like, "What are you, a crazy person?" Like, and that was pre like Forged in Fire and all this stuff. And now, you tell somebody a knife maker, they're like, "Oh, like that show on Forged in Fire." Like, yeah. And it's wild. But like when you got into the knife world, like back in the 90s when I got into it, you start to realize it's actually pretty huge, and then it's grown a ton. But there's a lot of little worlds like that are small that it just takes the right person to get into there. And then you can own that whole space as a company.
Man, and like we say, like we call it our ranch and rodeo community. In those communities, there's a lot of similarities, right? Like with what they do, but they're also pretty different. And, I care a lot about that space, even though like I don't have a lot of background in the ranch or rodeo space, but they're huge. Like I think about what I care about with hunting is a lot of like wildlife and wildlife habitat. Man, you think about the West and how many, like we certainly have swaths of public land, but man, a whole lot of that land is also private.
Yeah.
And I want those folks to continue to stay stoked on
Yeah, taking care of that land.
Taking care of the land, taking care of the herds that are on it.
Taking care of the, like a lot of the ranchers are putting in, drinkers for, these watering fountains for their herds, but also the elk and the deer drinking out of those.
Yep.
And spraying weeds and taking care of it and making sure there's good native grasses and, timber management where they're logging and making sure that, entire swaths of timber aren't burning up and all that. And then providing access for, I always tell my kids when we go deer hunting out in eastern Montana, a lot of the places we go deer hunt, there's nobody out there tourism. They're not doing anything the rest of the year. But then those ranchers get inundated with people like us.
Yep.
We come out there and, it's so important that we as hunters really respect, like they've been working for the last 300 days. And now you're walking up to their door to ask for access. Like,
oh man,
shut their gates, walk your lazy ass in there. Don't be driving all over their fields. Like, because they're providing millions of acres of opportunity for us to come out. And the rest of the year, they're just struggling to survive and working their asses off.
Oh, for sure.
Like that hat you're wearing right now has got that MKC branded logo. And we frankly did that just as a shout out to those people.
Yep.
Like that's what it's for,
For sure. I don't want to go crazy far down that rabbit hole. But it's a delicate balance between like public and private. Like almost all my hunting is done on public. Even when I'm hunting in Arkansas, it's done on public land. And I'm extremely grateful for that. And I would love, to have access to private land or to be a private landowner. I'm not necessarily that. And so while I often want to advocate, like I'm a huge advocate for public land, public access and those things. I definitely recognize that a lot of our lands are private, and I want to make sure that, habitat is great for those herds that move in and out of private.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. There's a lot of public land that's landlocked by private, and it's hard because a lot of us can bitch about, private guy locking up tons of land, locks up the gate on his land, which locks up hundreds of thousands of acres behind his ranch.
Yep.
And you know what? A lot of those places have been in families for generations and generations. And unfortunately, some of that stuff sells and some rich guy buys it. And I have more of the attitude of like, I wish I was the rich guy. But there's nothing you can do about it.
Yep.
And again, we live in a free world. We live in a free country. So to then start ordering people to open up their private land to access public, like it just gets into a slippery slope, It's tough. But we're fortunate out west to have so much public land where like in Texas, there's almost none.
Not in the slightest.
Yeah.
Well, so, that was one thing I, half joked about, but half seriously when I moved down to Texas for this gig. I hunted a bunch in Tennessee and Arkansas, and that's all public land, and there's plenty of access for it, say in those places. Or, like staying up here, was gracious enough to stay at a friend's lodge, and I walk out the back door and there's millions of acres of either wilderness or federal land or state land. It's just all right there.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
I'd say 80% of that valley, of the Bitterroot Valley, is public.
And, where I'm at in Texas, it's the land of high fence and exotics and private. And, for folks that have, built up that level of wealth to be able to acquire some land and want to enjoy it, like that's awesome for them. But it makes it challenging to try and hunt in your own backyard.
It does. And it is, as a local, it happened to me, and I'll show you after the podcast if you want, but there's a bull that an out-of-stater shot that was, I drove over to eastern Montana to elk hunt in the breaks and drove all the way over there. And I was pulling into my hunting spot about 1 a.m. or so to midnight, and I was just going to camp next to my truck by the river in my sleeping bag. It's archery season. It's hot during the day.
Yep.
Nice, cool evenings. And so I'm pulling in. It's like 7 hours from my house, and I'm pulling down this little dirt road. I'm almost to the river, and this guy's driving out, and he has a giant bull on the top of his car, and it's an FJ Cruiser.
Oh, man.
And it's license plates are Wisconsin. And I'm like, freaking out of staters. I'm like, God damn it.
Yep, man.
Beat it. But, it is the cool thing about Montana and Idaho, Wyoming.
Yep.
Like, you can load up your vehicle in Wisconsin, and you can dream of this hunt for years, you and your hunting buddy, and you can plan it all out on Onyx maps and all this stuff. and you can load up and drive to Montana. And if you do it all right and you get lucky, you can kill an absolute pig of a bull on public land. And that is super special.
It's incredible. And with, I'm later in life coming to the big game world. And so, like I don't have the same history, but I hear a lot of the conversations going on right now between like, like for Montana residents being frustrated with so many out-of-staters coming, and tags becoming harder and harder to get. And I hear a lot of this conversation. I'm like, man, y'all are 10 years behind us in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Because man, it's a whole ordeal for out-of-state hunters that come and hunt this state and federal land, to where Arkansas has now created separate seasons. So for out-of-state hunters that are limited to 30 days, and it's a designated 30 days on where they can hunt outside of federal lands. And, like there's so much pressure on that. And there's a lot of frustration for residents of the state, for out-of-staters that come in, and a lot of times they don't necessarily know what they're doing. And so, man, someone that doesn't know what they're doing in the woods puts so much more pressure on that resource than someone who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
You as a resident with a background in big game hunting, I'm going to expect could go into some swath of public land. You know how to comport yourself to not go blow a herd out. Mm-hmm. But, man, someone can come to the state of Arkansas to go hunt ducks, and they're going to go crank up their motor. If they start churning through the woods, they're going to bust up rafts of ducks, cause them to fly. They're going to bump over to private land where they're not receiving that pressure. They're going to take off in the middle of the day. Man, maybe they pop shoot wood ducks, and they're going to ruin hunting for a whole block of woods. And
that's what I would do.
Yeah, well, yeah. That's not specifically non-residents, but it's people that are not in those woods day in and day out, investing their time and their resources there. And so there's a lot of historical frustration. And you can get on social media and you'll be in these groups that are frustrated with, you'll walk to a boat ramp and you're like 1/3 or 1/4 of the license plates are for residents, and the rest are, non-residents.
Ultimately, there's nothing you're going to be able to do about that, and all you really can do about it, and it's where it's important for hunters, and then also brands, especially these big brands like Yeti and all the other big companies, and hopefully ours can do more and more as we grow. Is you got to support a lot of these initiatives that are public land access or conservation of the animal herds.
Yep.
Goat Alliance or Sheep Foundation or Mule Deer Foundation, Elk Foundation, like all of these organizations and foundations, if it's $30 or $50 to join, I was talking to the Montana Wild Sheep Foundation guy yesterday, and about they're going to be kind of redoing their membership possibly. And all around, that money, they're trying to use that money to frankly give, your 4-year-old son a chance to hunt.
Yep.
And that's really what it's all about. And, the problem's going to get worse. There's going to be less and less land. There's going to be more and more people. A guy like Joe Rogan, quite frankly, has been both a blessing and a curse, and I'd say way more of a blessing.
Yeah.
But we need more hunters, because those hunters also vote, right? And so you need those ballots, those votes, because if you don't have them, like in Washington where you lose a spring bear season, stuff like that, to a ballot, or like the deal with going on in Colorado with the wolves, where now they're quote unquote reintroducing wolves. When you don't have hunters, then you don't have votes.
Yep.
And then if you want lots of votes, then you have lots of hunters. And that's where Rogan's been amazing, between him and Cam and a couple of these guys, Dudley, on his podcast, representing hunting in a really positive light, educating people about archery hunting and how exciting it is, how fun it is, and a lot of the issues and some of the experts that Rogan's had on, even like Steve Rinella, having those people on a podcast that's frankly, it's the biggest voice in the world, period.
Yep.
Rogan is the most powerful voice, period. To have hunting represented in a positive light on a podcast like that, does create more vehicles at a trailhead, but it also creates more voters at the ballot box. So
I certainly hope so. That's one of the, there's a lot of people that, they like to chirp online about many of those personalities. And, I'm a lot of ways with them. Like I get frustrated sometimes that you show up and there's more people at a trailhead or harder to draw a tag, et cetera. Particularly, man, I get frustrated when people start blowing up spots in Arkansas, right?
Yeah.
I've hunted those places for decades, or I'll talk to my grandfather about when he was hunting the White River, and we talk about all these, river levels and how they're different and how ducks are moving. And then you go in there and the spot's just blown up now because of people can just find that little oxbow or offshoot from maps where they couldn't have found it before. But at the same time, most of those people chirping are not really advocating.
Right.
And they're not doing much to either volunteer to improve those habitats. they're probably not showing up for either state or federal meetings or hearings,
right?
That are voting for things like voting on impact on regulations that then impact their ability to access.
Right.
I mean, that's been a big one in say Arkansas. Is there's a lot of hate on the state agency that manages their wildlife, and waterfowl being the biggest draw to Arkansas. A lot of people like to chirp or be frustrated with how they're managing that resource. But man, you can show up to one of their hearings and it's half empty often.
And a lot of times with the case that it is in Montana, a lot of times those people, those agencies are actually advocating for the hunters. I know in this, the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, frankly, their salaries are paid by hunters' dollars.
Yep.
And they know kind of where their bread is buttered. And they also know where the levels of the animals are. It's like stuff with the grizzly bear. Like Montana's tried to get the grizzly bear off the endangered species list year after year after year. And people within FWP want it off the list. It's more of the activist type judge stuff that's going on, and a lot of the environmental groups that are kind of over the top. And I don't even like the term environmentalist, because I would argue that the best environmentalists out there are most hunters.
Oh, like 100%.
Most of us actually have more writing on taking care of our environment than a lot of the quote unquote environmentalists.
Oh gosh.
A lot of us, our tax dollars, our money is going to the environment. We're out in the woods actually keeping track of things, watching things, picking up garbage, clearing trails, like outfitters are out there cutting trails. And then guess who comes walking along? Some hiker with REI boots on, looking at birds, right?
Yep.
And they're taking advantage of what hunters are doing with clearing trails and a lot of the tax dollars, because there's no tax on going out for a hike.
Nope.
But there's definitely a tax on hunting.
100%.
So we could go down that rabbit hole forever, but, and like with Rogan, I always say there's a ton of people that listen to him that never, ever will hunt. But if it means when they go to a ballot box and they're a tiny bit more educated, and maybe they don't even vote on that issue, maybe they just abstain, that's better than them just automatically get rid of this or get rid of that. There has to be a fairly sizable segment of his population that's really in love with what he does, or a lot of his guests, to where at least makes them potentially educate themselves a little more. I mean, certain people you're never going to reach, but, podcasts like his and like so many out there, all we can do is keep talking. And then frankly, on our own social medias, like with us, we post, some of our hunters' grip and grins and stuff like that, but we try to post the stuff that's tasteful.
Yeah.
What we post and whatnot, because there's no sense in posting stuff that's just super gory to drive people away.
Yeah.
And you got the real hardcore guy that's like, well, screw that person. It's like, well, that person votes, man. Like, and a lot of times that person's actually more vocal than you are at a meeting. They're at the meeting bitching and you're not there at all,
I'm certainly don't want to speak for or against, because I'm so newer to like the West as far as the state agencies are, but man, I see like folks, like they're talking about changing season dates in Arkansas, or they'll change, talking about, when they flood public land and things like that. And people either don't show up, or all they really do is chirp online, or that, they don't want to come in and contribute. Or, man, you can call some of those biologists, and they're, like, you can get a hold of their phone number from the state agency.
Yeah.
You can go talk to them and be like, man, I really advocate for X position because I see these things happening. And most of the time, man, they'll listen, and a couple of those phone calls from people that really are invested in care can change a course. And
it's because they also are definitely getting the phone calls from the other side.
Yep.
At a certain point, if they're feeling so much pressure with no support, it's quite frankly, it's no different than going to a school board meeting or whatever. Like, you show up at a school board meeting, and usually it's one side, and they're screaming and bitching about something. And if the board doesn't hear anybody else going, well, hold on a second, like, how about this viewpoint? If all they hear is one side, and their job is to vote and represent the public, a lot of times your vote can go, the way that you don't want it to.
100%.
So people have to get involved for sure. So, well, speaking of getting involved, Yeti's also, I see your Folds of Honor shirt.
Yeah, man.
Yeti's definitely involved in a lot of conservation stuff. What are some of the groups you guys work with or some of the projects you're working on?
Yeah. Some big ones like Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation is always a big one. I mentioned Ducks Unlimited earlier in the waterfowl space. Like Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance is one. Folds of Honor is a really cool organization we work with every year for Veterans Day. They do some awesome work supporting the families of veterans as well as like first responders,
right.
Particularly in the realm of like providing educational opportunities for them in the case of a fallen hero and things along those lines, a variety of different scholarships and stuff. And so they do really cool work there. We partner with them every Veterans Day. We do all of a certain line of product that has their logo on it.
It's really cool.
Them. They do great work.
Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, it's cool. It's literally 15 miles away from here, the headquarters.
Yep.
Right down the road. And we're lucky enough to have our knives now in their visitor center for sale because we don't have a storefront. Mm-hmm. We're getting a lot of people asking, where they can stop and look at our knives. Yeah. And so it's cool because we can have our knives and they can be seen and a lot of people can handle them and potentially purchase them and take them home. But it's also cool because then, obviously the money that the Elk Foundation's making off of that's going right back to the Elk Foundation. But I was donating knives to them when I was 14 years old. And they were small back then. And it's unbelievable to see, that was the mid-90s.
Yep.
To see where they've gone and how big they've grown. They used to have a different building here, different headquarters. Now we drive by and it's like, you just can't even believe that they were there. But, what's cool about the Elk Foundation is you'll be out hunting here in the West and you'll be looking at your Onyx maps trying to figure out where you're going to go, and there'll be an elk head right on the middle of your map. And that's a piece of property or a project or something like that the RMEF people have worked on or purchased to preserve like a calving area or migration route, something like that. It's just really cool what the Elk Foundation does, and it's cool that Onyx Maps actually includes that stuff in there.
Yep.
Because it's a actual representation visually that you can see on your maps of like, oh, my dollars that I'm donating or buying a gun or a cooler or raffle tickets or whatever at a banquet.
Yep.
Is directly like showing up on my map while I'm hunting. Yep. And now I'm walking around in an area that has been directly supported by me and fellow hunters, which is really a cool thing.
That's awesome. Like you tapped on something earlier that like RMEF stands for, and I'm constantly in thought, I love to hunt, but I've got this generational story of hunters, and like I'm like, man, what's the future of hunting going to look like for my sons?
Yeah.
Like my 6-year-old, that he has been hunting with me for a few years. We've been able to turkey hunt together, and that's all they've done so far. But this year, he's ready to start shooting deer, and I'm pumped on that. We've got good opportunity for deer. We've got some family friends that give us access to their property in Texas, and we have that. But man, I think about like trying to come out west, and I want to make sure that there's an opportunity for them to come out, and whether they kill something or not, that there's an opportunity for them to come and enjoy that time in the wild, and hopefully for it to be in a there's this balance of like opportunity and quality, but also to have quality with their hunts.
You keep them little out-of-staters out of my
Yes, that's exactly right. When they come visit Josh's backyard.
Yeah. I'm not taking you guys out anywhere around here. I don't want all them little Jones kids. Those Jones kids are going to turn 15, have a driver's license, and they're all going to be driving around my hunting spot.
That's right, man. Those little dudes are lethal with the bow, too. It's fun.
That's Hank, my boy, just bought his first pickup, just a small little 1999 Ford Ranger and a couple 100,000 miles on it. But all he wanted when I asked him, like, well, what are you thinking for a vehicle? Because he's in driver's ed. He'll actually finish up on Thursday.
Yep.
And I was like, what do you want for a vehicle? A car or, whatever. And a lot of kids at that age are like, I want a fast car with a loud stereo. And Hank's like, I just want something that can get me into the woods.
There you go. Like, I love it. Yep.
It doesn't matter how ugly, what it is. Like, he saw it and he was like, 4-wheel drive.
Yep.
It's got a bed. Ford Ranger, which he's almost the size of the Ford Ranger
himself. 100%.
Like he's going to have to.
He's big boy.
He's beefy. You're going to have to wedge himself into it, but it doesn't matter.
It's going to get him
Does
there.
it get me in the woods?
Oh, yeah.
That's
and we chatted about this. Like my first vehicle, like another fun generational story. Like I ended up like it was like a red Jeep Wrangler YJ, and 4-cylinder, that thing. I was joking, like the fastest I ever got it was downhill. Thing was pegged in 5th gear, and I got to like 75.5, and I was like, I'm flying.
Breaking the sound barrier.
But like my dad's first thing was just, an off-road hunting Jeep. His was a Scrambler, and my granddad's first was a Willys Jeep. And, the only reason we cared about those is because we could drive off-road, and it would enable us to go hunting.
Yeah.
And it's like, you throw all the gear in there, you get stuck. The sucker's so light, throw a winch on it, you're back out, and you're cruising again.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's been my mentality. I'm, don't have any fancy vehicles, but they're trucks that get me.
Yeah,
like where I can hunt.
Like I told you, my thing with Hank too with that thing was it doesn't have enough horsepower to get himself in too much trouble.
Exactly. So. There's a lot of benefit to that.
Yeah.
And the other thing with those Jeeps is it was constantly breaking down, so I got to learn a lot of life values on.
Little mechanicking skills.
Little mechanicking skills. A little, my truck's broke down, so I can't drive for 3 days.
Yeah,
figure it out. Something
I
else.
think, and like Hank's puffs a tiny bit of smoke when it starts up, and it's like I think it's good for kids to have a vehicle. It's like, hey, when you fuel up, you better check the oil.
That's right.
Like it's how many miles per quart of oil do you get?
Yeah,
I think it's good for kids instead of just having like the nicest stuff. He did tell the group that was here the night before. He's like, hey, you guys want to come see my new truck? I bought one this morning, and they're like, yeah, what is it? And he's like, it's a Ford Raptor, and they were like. Ford Raptor,
wow.
Like, what a spoiled little shit, They go walking around the corner and it's like, oh.
That's right.
It's a Ranger.
That's right.
So we're going to definitely decal that thing as a Ford Raptor.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
That's fantastic.
Well, where can people follow you, or you're pretty off the social? I mean, you're there kind of lurking, but
I'm about the lamest follow you can have.
Mostly follow Yeti then?
Yeti's the ticket. Yeti are, we've got a variety of really cool hunting ambassadors, and those folks are who best amplify our voice in the hunting community. Them or like our conservation partners, Wild Sheep, Army F, those guys. Those are the best places for it. Sometimes I end up in the background by accident. I try and dodge the camera or dodge the social. One day I might make a post. I've never posted, but one day I might.
Which is actually what's fun about like being around you, shooting with you and stuff. It's actually about the relationship. It kind of drives me crazy. I mean, we all kind of need some photos and stuff for our stuff, but I hate it when it all feels so forced and so fake. Like, it's one thing to have. It's kind of nice having like videographer like Henry or we've got Riley working for us, but it's nice having them in the background just taking pictures.
Yep.
And it's nice for us to just be able to do our thing.
And you're not back there worrying, we got to get, we got to feed the beast here.
And some of that stuff gets out of control, but
100%.
But it is the necessity. I mean, it's the world we live in, and it's the way we do stay connected with our fans. And a lot of our fans love to, they're living vicariously through us. A lot of it, where they're dreaming of coming to attack or going on an elk hunt or a bear hunt or something like that. So, it's all good too. But so. Basically, go follow Cole Kramer then.
That's right, Cole Kramer.
Yeah,
what
Yeti,
a guy.
He's a Yeti ambassador and a Montana Knife Company ambassador and an all-around good dude. Unless he's listening to this, and then I have nothing good to say about it.
That's right. Terrible character.
Yeah. So, well, dude, thanks for coming on.
Certainly.
Got anything else you need to cover?
Man, I think we've been through the gambit.
Okay.
Privileged to be here. Stoked on it, man.
Well, we shared a hunting camp in Texas last year. Hopefully we can do that again and sit around a campfire again at some point.
That'll be fantastic.
Thanks, brother.
Appreciate it, man.
Yep.